Hi, I'm Philippa McDonald, and welcome to a special series of interviews brought to you by Compass on enduring powers of attorney. Bill, welcome to Compass.info. When did you know you might have younger onset Alzheimer's?
As an educator, the very first time was actually in the classroom. So where I was teaching these boys and girls for about 3 months, I suddenly started to have difficulty remembering the names of kids. And that was like something for me quite unusual, because as deputy principal of the college, I'd remember hundreds, thousands of kids' names. And all of a sudden, something was happening. I was also a teacher of physics and chemistry, and I never used a textbook. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't start remembering the equations, couldn't remember what I was supposed to teach. I never used to use a calculator. Then all of a sudden, I had to use a calculator. My mind just wasn't doing what I was used to it to do.
Is there any way of describing that moment of forgetting the kids' names?
It's probably one of those things that sort of creeps up on you. At first you sort of put it down to maybe I was tired, maybe I was just not having a good day. Then all of a sudden you think, you ask a question, you go, oh, geez, I don't know who that is. And for me, it was confusing. I was confused at first. And then the reality set in. I had actually looked after my father for 4 years before he passed away of dementia in 2012, and the penny just dropped.
How would you describe the impact on your life of a diagnosis?
I think I was a very career-orientated person. So for me, I had my dreams or aspirations. I actually knew where I wanted to be. The diagnosis for me was absolutely devastating. They were all gone. My life, as I knew it, was now changed. Initially, I think I look at it and there was anger, and I was shocked. And then I moved to grief and sadness. And I say that because the whole idea of the fact that it was incurable disease really struck home. I remember a time where I simply just socially isolated. I stayed at home, I ate and drank too much, and I put on over 20 kilograms. And as a time I often referred to, there was a darkness around me. It was like there was emotionally and socially, there was just an abyss. There was nothing. Life had no meaning for me at all.
But then you turned it all around.
I was lucky. And I think I put that down to my family, I put it down to friends. My friends took me away to a rugby trip. And I thought, okay, this is going to be my last hurrah, as the Americans would say. And I think I had so much fun. I laughed so much. I behaved like a 21-year-old with all my friends. I suddenly realised that, no, you can't give up. You've got to fight this disease. And that was the start of my journey.
Tell us about what you've achieved since that diagnosis.
I think my main achievement is achieving a goal. And the goal that I set myself wasn't to participate in masters swimming and surf life saving. It wasn't to be an advocate. It was much broader than that. And what I wanted to show people is that you can still live a better life with a diagnosis. And if I'm proud of anything that I've done, that would be it. I think, and in my own way, I've started to break down a bit of the stigma associated with a person who is living with dementia, that it isn't what you think it is. And sure, there are many, many challenges in front of you. But if you set yourself goals and you work hard at it, you will eventually get there. And that's probably the message that I would love to convey to people.
Well, talk us through the stigma versus the reality.
I think I'd probably say I'm blessed in the sense that the friends around me accept me for who I am. They understand that I'm trying to fight the disease. And so therefore, they're there, they're helping me, they're supporting me. So the stigma for them is probably not there. But when I go out into society, I suppose, And when I start talking to other people who aren't as fortunate for me, I sit back and go, wow, I'm really lucky what's happening to me. But that's not really what I'm about. It's really about, what is other people who are living with dementia, what are they experiencing? What are they feeling? And that's probably why I come back to that original goal I was sort of speaking about before, is that I think it's a really good thing to actually work in such a way that you're trying to break down the stigma that everyone who are living with dementia are actually encountering, and raise the awareness of people that, yes, it is a declining situation where your cognitive ability is worsening with time, but you can still enjoy yourself. You can still get up in the morning and maybe there's something completely different to what you were doing, but there is passion, there is meaning for life. And I think that's the important thing.
What plans have you got in place for the future? Do you have an enduring power of attorney?
I'm a little bit naughty on this. So let me firstly put my hand up and say that even though I honestly tell everyone, like you've got to, when you get a diagnosis, I've got a will. I've set that in place, but I think I've been so busy, if that's a good excuse, is I understand the need to have a power of attorney. I understand why you have to have an enduring power of attorney. I haven't done it yet. And I know that, interesting, when I was talking to Lance from Dementia Australia, when he first spoke about this, I went, oh my God, this is a wake-up call for me. I haven't done what I preach. So if I answer the question that way, what will be the first thing I do after I leave here? I'll be doing exactly that.
An enduring power of attorney?
Oh, definitely.
And why?
For my own father, I was enduring power of attorney. And there's a lot of hidden benefits, I think. Firstly, I know that when initially with my father, as soon as he put my twin brother and myself in as power of attorney, enduring power of attorney, he was really happy. It was like he had a clear mind. He sort of understood now that there was someone who he trusted, someone who would look after him as this disease progressed. And I think that's really important. From my own perspective, I actually understand that. But I'm not saying I'm not logical, I'm not strong-minded, but if I was going to offer advice to people with an enduring power of attorney, is that it's not just anyone. I think you really got to consider the fact that who you're putting in that position is a person who's going to look after you for the rest of your life. And that will be a period of time where you will start to decline. Now, that takes a real strength of character to do that. Strength of character, not just in making decisions, but being able to do the hardest one. And by that I mean is that I think the hardest decision I made was, when do I put my father into 24/7 hour care? And from my own experience, I've seen that. And for me, when I put my enduring power of attorney, I'm going to put that as a clause. And one of the things I'd sort of recommend to people who are doing an enduring power of attorney is that you seek legal advice, because there are so many things that you can do. And one of them, from my perspective, is going to be that when the time comes, I need you, I want you to look after me. And if it means I'm in a 24/7 care, then that's the way it is. And it goes with my blessing. Do not feel bad about it. And that's a strength of character.
So when you're looking for that strength of character, who might you look to be your attorney or attorneys for your enduring power of attorney?
I think it sort of depends on your own family circumstances. And I think in a lot of cases that might be your partner, it might be your son or your daughter. But having that lived experience, I feel that's really, really important. But the persons I will be putting in place are the ones who understand the disease, that over time I will decline. They have this strength of character to, as my behaviour patterns change, they can deal with me. There's a strength of character, I believe strongly, in making that final decision. And I look at all that, and some people, they could be so close to you that they can't do that. There's an awareness factor that their role is to manage everything about you, everything so that you are being cared for in the best possible way. And you might have family members, you might have friends who all have their 2 cents worth, wanting different things or believing that this is probably a better way of doing it. But at the end of the day, I want that person to have that strength of character to listen and make the best decision which is in front of me.
What might be you've mentioned some of the specific issues, particularly if it comes to 24-hour care. What are some of the other specific issues that you might want to convey in making an enduring power of attorney to your attorneys?
I think firstly, it's the financial matters. I'll need someone to look after my assets, make sure that everything is there for me, it's being used wisely for my care, and it will last for the time that I pass away. My father, and I'll add legal matters into it, sadly my father went through a divorce during that time. So he needed Peter and myself to look after his legal matters, so that may not apply to everyone. There's also personal situations, personal circumstances, maintaining contact with other family members, for cousins and things like that. It's making decisions about your care. And initially, I would like to stay at home, but obviously as things change, that will change too. And being able to make all those type of decisions.
What would be one of the most important aspects of your enduring power of attorney?
This one comes from listening to a lot of other people, and it's like a termination clause. And I suppose that say I make the wrong judgment, the person who I thought was trusted, who was going to look after me, isn't doing the right thing, then I would put a termination clause in to allow other family members to enact that if needed.
What does capacity mean to someone living with Alzheimer's, dementia, or mild cognitive impairment?
Capacity for me is to understand what's happening around you and then being able to make a decision. And it's an informed decision. What I mean by that is that being able to listen, take in information, process it, and then make a decision. And sadly to say, with the nature of this condition, with dementia, those things start to change. I knew for my father, for example, that he could make a decision. He could decide and tell me what he wanted for dinner. So from a capacity point of view, that was fine. But when we started to deal with the divorce proceedings and things like that, it was far, far too complex for him. And he needed Peter and I's help to do that. So for me, capacity is an interesting thing. It is a decision-based. Is that person able to make a sound, informed decision is probably the way I look at capacity, with the clear understanding that will change over time with people who are living with dementia. And I think that's probably the area which causes the most concern.
It's not clear-cut, is it? Because your capacity can fluctuate or might be different at different times of the day.
Oh, totally. And how do you make that decision? Like, there are times with my father, it was really difficult. He would have a bad day, and then his ability to decide what he wanted to eat didn't exist. The next day he'd bounce back, like you think, oh, has my father got dementia? What's going on here? It was an extraordinary thing. And eventually, because it was so difficult, I did actually seek the help of other people. And his GP was really good. I would also look at a psychologist, even social worker, to get involved where there are situations where the idea of capacity or trying to determine someone's capacity, it's often too difficult for me to do.
I hope I'm not crossing a line here, and no need to go with it if I am. But to you, what does capacity mean, and how will you convey that?
So if I was looking at myself, when I can't understand what is happening around me, and I can't make a decision that is in my best interest, then I have lost capacity. I don't have the capacity to look after myself anymore.
How do people living with Alzheimer's, dementia, mild cognitive impairment manage financial decisions? And tell us about the importance of supported decision making.
I think it can be, initially it's probably not too hard, but as the disease progresses, it gets harder and trickier. So probably my advice would be, in the very initial stages of getting a diagnosis, you attend to it very quickly. So while you have capacity and while you understand what's going on, start putting plans in place for that. And that could be as simple as saying, for example, you might have 9 or 10 bank accounts or something. Pull them all back down to 1 or 2. Make sure that you can manage it initially. You know what's going on. I'd even look to having someone who you trust, maybe your enduring power of attorney, to come in and go through the counts with you. Go through everything. You do it periodically, so you have a peace of mind that you know what's sort of going on, and so does everyone else. One of the things that I did find, as when I was enduring power of attorney for my father, was that having more than one voice was really, really good. And the idea of sharing the decision base, to me, is really important. And in the case of Peter and I, there were 2 of us, but we're actually able to extend that. So, but we also reserve the right at the last to make the final decision. But to involve others in that process, I think, is really important, because everyone has different ideas. They've heard that this is really good, why don't we do that? And at the end of the day, someone has to make a decision in the best interest of the person living with dementia. But the idea of sharing it, being collaborative, I think is really important, because you are really acting in the best interest of that person. But at the end, someone's got to make that final decision.
Bill, you talk about wanting an attorney with a strong character. What does strong character mean to you?
I think rather than define it, I might just give you an example of what happened to me. There was a period of time where I used to own a restaurant, and it was around the time that I was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's disease. And I had this lady come in with her husband, and would do so every week, every Sunday, and sit down in the sun and have a drink. And in our conversations that happened is that I eventually learnt that he'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and this is something that he loved doing. He loved coming in. And that went on for a period of time. And it was also a time where I was diagnosed and no one knew. One of the things I couldn't do was tell people. And then one day she just stopped coming in. And a period of months went past. And then she turned up with about 4 or 5 of her friends. And she sat down and she was really, really upset, etc., etc. And eventually she told me, said, I've just made that decision. Said, my husband was getting to the point I couldn't care for him, and I've just made that decision, and I feel so bad about it. And my friends are just taking me out. And I looked at her and I said, from my perspective, you made the right decision. And I left her, and at the end of it, she came over and said, Bill, what did you mean by that? How do you know that I made the right decision? And it was then, at that time, I told her that I had younger onset Alzheimer's disease, and you did what I would have thought I would hope my wife would do.